sanctuary. Dharker's work celebrates life with irreverence and playfulness, drawing from her diverse background as a Muslim Calvinist, raised in Glasgow, adopted by India, and married into Wales. She received the Queen's Gold Medal for Poetry in 2014 for her contributions to the art form, and she's also Chancellor of Newcastle University. Welcome, Imtiaz. Robert Sita is a performer and poet, as well as a broadcaster and history author. He's published 7 poetry collections and won numerous awards and prizes for his writing, including Forward Poetry Prize, National Poetry Competition, London Poetry Competition, and Houseman Poetry Prize. He's also head of BBC History, and in 2022, he published Broadcasting Britain, 100 Years of the BBC for the Corporation's Centenary, and presented a major LinkedIn series on Radio 4. Now, for the next session, we've got till 12:05, but we're not going to take any questions at the end of the session because I think it's not that kind of a talk, but our speakers will be around afterwards if you want to talk to them. Also, their books are available from the bookshop, and I think they'll be willing to sign them for you. So please do buy copies of their books. So I'm going to welcome them on stage as I exit.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for that introduction. And thank you, Rahul and Nilufer, for inviting poetry into the festival year after year. I wanted to tell you that today you're going to hear two kinds of stories. One is where I talk about an unwelcome prophecy that I'm speaking about in Shadow Reader. And then my friend, dear friend and poet Robert Sita is going to tell the story of the cello and the nightingale. But both at the heart deal with where the human world crosses over with the natural world, where they encounter each other and the kind of conversation that they can have with each other. So for my session, when I was in my 20s, in Bombay, I was taken to see a number of astrologers. I have to say, kicking and screaming, I didn't want to be there. One of them was a shadow reader who measured my shadow, did all kinds of calculations, and picked out an ancient scroll from behind his back and told me my future. I didn't believe a word he said. But even the mind of a non-believer can be possessed and occupied and colonized in a way. In the year of my death, when I was 25, the shadow reader said I would live to a ripe old age. He licked his finger, flicked a page, and told me the year of my death. That year has arrived. Out of the Rose Garden. When you come away from and this one I'm reading for Yogesh, who especially requested it. Out of the Rose Garden. When you come away from the Rose Garden, your eyes have changed color in the rain, and the scent of attar follows you home. You arrive in the city of pointing fingers, to keening sirens and beeping phones, the clicking, the screens all on, and you still have petals falling from your mouth. You cross from corner to corner, a fugitive in this time. Your eyes are watercolor. In them, the city and all its workings have been stamped with guilt. The script blazes over the walls of the meat market, but the streets are brambled, thorned, and on the illuminated borders, there are drops of blood. But the roses are savages that will eat you alive given the chance. The map of this country is made of scars. They will put the body on a slab for examination. No. Out of respect for this body, no. There will be an inquiry to determine, no. It is clear the missile came from, no. There was some jostling, two sides clashing, no. There is no clear indication both sides were at fault, no. Seen from above, it looks like grief wrapped in a shroud of dust. But the blood has seeped so long and deep, it could be a ring of rust. Out of respect, the wounds will be washed, inspected, and sewn up to look like a map of a country that does not exist. They will carry the body as if it is a homeland they have lost, and brought to a field of poppies to lay to rest. On their shoulders, they will carry the coffin, yes. The mourners will lift their hands to honor her, yes. There will be a bullet, there will be jostling, yes. This is a wound opening. This is a country being torn again and again. A person falling apart, yes. And everyone watching, yes. Did we watch this happening? Yes. Did anyone see? No. Witness. Sometimes the truth is not a beacon, but a small flame, or only the light of a phone falling on the face of witness. Face to face. Who is telling this? The one who gives the gift or the one who takes? Can the writer be forgiven by the one who is written? Does the warp look back at the one who is weaving and say, this is not how I remember it, not how it happened at all? Who belongs in this thing you're making? The rose garden throws away its symmetry and lifts off the page with a mind of its own. The wind spreads rumors and a new language blows in, written in script that looks like your heart beating. Windows tilt to catch the truth at a different angle. Our shadow lies on this page, reader. Your hand slides off parchment to touch human skin. Open the other face. Look in. So really, Shadow Reader is about foretelling and telling and retelling a story. So much of what's going on, events, conflicts, how they're reported in the media, is about who's taken charge of the story, who's taken possession of it, who tells it or retells it or rewrites it. You just have to look at how history can be distorted or the different ways one event is reported. As I said, about occupation of different kinds. And through the book, I'm using this image of weaving. Loom. They are weaving the world and everything that lives in it. They bend over the loom, reading it like a book that will teach them the structure of tulips, crocus heads, roses. If the knot is wrong, they feel the mistake as a glitch in the bones. When their fingers bleed, the borders leak ruby and scarlet. Trees blossom out of season. Fruit fills and ripens as if time means nothing, as if pain is only the start of beauty. They are weaving so hard and fast, you would think their lives depend on it. They take the tears off their children's faces to fill up the watercourses. They are weaving their times in thread, teaching the loom the way of the world. It hums with business, heaves with the blasphemy of human bodies, hosts of angels, swarms of midges. There's no end to it. Songbirds turn into bombers, gazelles to armored tanks. On every border, there's new danger. Drones overhead, walls blasted to rubble. Messages appear on the backs of buses. Neon signs call for help. Clubbers spill out, looking for Ubers, demanding bacon rolls or the first train home, vomiting at corners. The one who is tied to the rock by a chain watches the vultures circling down for the succulence inside, the liver. Here is a withered garden, trees whipped to the bone. Starlings fall out of the sky, and the weavers, bury them in silk. They make up spells and blessings to hold things together till morning, when the children get up out of sleep, bare feet on the floor, windows clattering, doors banging open, to let the green back in. It smells like split melon. This is not a prayer mat. It is the prayer. The weaver makes a pitch. Every one of us has met this weaver in our time. This is the work of many hands. It contains all of paradise, eaten by moths in one small corner. For you, special price. Where you belong. You can squat in this room if you don't say a word. You can stay in this town if you pay for a room. You can go on the train if it's off-peak. You can speak your mind if you change your look. You can have your chance if you don't expect luck. You can be in the group if you get enough likes. You can live with family if you toe the line. You can keep your children if we countersign. You can enter this church if you quote the book. You can open the book if you close your mind. You can save our time if you follow the rules. You can play a role if you buy the mask. You can take on the task if no one else wants it. You can ask the question if you never offend. You can belong, but only if you don't stay too long. You can end it now or start over again. You can follow the signs but never turn back. You can see you've run out of time and years. You can leave in tears or go with a laugh. You can take your clothes, but leave your shoes and that attitude behind. It does you no favors, and you can do us a favor. Don't change your mind. Thank you. Thank you. For the minicab driver who looked as if he needed feeding. He looks so young, his hands bony at the wheel. I wonder if he's been out all night, what he might have had for breakfast, and what he eats when his shift ends, whether his mother makes him Punjabi samosas, or Bengali mustard fish, or Kerala rice, if he prefers the mangoes of the north or the sweeter ones from further south. Before I can stop them, the words fall out of my mouth. And where are you from? I mean, your people. They land somewhere on the back of his neck, slide into the rearview mirror, roll into his eyes. He looks back for 1 second, and his face is a passport, and his back is a flag. And he says, Barnsley, and I pay and get out. I was in the bar of the station hotel in Hull one day, and imagine seeing the poet Philip Larkin, sitting alone, a notoriously grouchy poet, sitting alone at a far table, drinking a beer. And I wondered, if he were there, would I go up and speak to him? No, of course not. I'd be nothing more than an unwelcome blot at the edge of his vision. But playing with that thought, I moved on to resurrect this dead poet as a young man. And I also began to construct his imaginary profile on a dating app. Swiping left on Larkin. Here he's younger, his shoulders thinner. She flicks a finger, swipes left. He is dismissed without a flicker. If they pass on the street, she sees a boy trudge by with a book and satchel under the arm, on the way to a lifetime of drudge, easy to overlook. In the edge of his eye, she's a blur between staying or dying, a whiff of abroad, the chaos of prams and infants teething. At the end of every birth is grieving. He takes the dark for a walk, his light on a leash, through the sputtering streets of a town caught in the act of drowning. From a window, A curtain is waving, but his back is turned. Shops shut up and shutters come down on the chatter of living, the guttering years. All roads lead to a leaving. He goes into the bar of the station hotel, sits for a while. When he leaves a pale ring on the table. Gold spills out of basements over his feet. He walks down a street and out of his name. Beyond rumour and fame, a flurry of letters blown into gutters, the glitter of language on cobbles. His words remain, hard as knuckles, bright as believing or half-believing. At the end of the world, there is always the sea and its breathing, swiping right, across a blue screen to something beginning. Now, I thought I was on a good roll with this resurrecting dead poets. So this next one is, I find Fez blowing on his saucer of tea. I find Fez blowing on his saucer of tea at the corner cafe. Fez, uncle, I say. You wouldn't recognize our old neighborhood. The landlord raised the rent, and all the people we know are gone. Your garden has been left to die in the drought. Someone has taken your books off the shelves and printed them again without the words. The koels have been rounded up and put in cages. The singers who sang your songs have been strangled in front of a live studio audience. Fez picks up the saucer and drinks from it. When the heart is full, it makes a tear on the face of the earth. You call it grief. I say it is hope of a flower. At least I think this is what he said, but I could be mistaken. His words could have been garbled in translation. They are walking, and now they are walking, and the movement of the feet for me was also a kind of weaving, a weaving of the stories through the movement of the feet. They are walking the night city, through the patched pockets and round the frayed edges, asking for change, a coin in the tin, anything. They are coming out of the crevices, the traps in alleys, weaving in and out of the lies, hauling their young behind them, because they heard you say it would be free and fair, and they believed you. They are walking to the edge of grief, where the world's creatures have gathered, the horses, the elephants, rabbits and pheasants, with their heads up and down, waiting to be accounted for before their ashes are scattered. They hack through brambles and barbed wire because someone said there is a garden on the other side. When they find the gate, their breath turns jagged with the effort of hoping. There is more than they bargained for. More sound, more touch, more air, too much to bear. They leave their worn shoes outside and shuffle in through banks of lily and iris, trees heavy with orange and almond. Their feet snag on ragged borders. Here are the pilfered jewels. Here are the looted mothers. Here are the people whose land was taken and given away, and the children sitting in front of screens learning who is the savior, the superhero, who makes the laws and says they can come or go, leave or stay. They are walking their own plundered hearts, and there is no end to the walking in the garden that is not a garden. No one is watching, so there is no way to know if they are still walking, still breathing, or falling over the edge of this poem that is not a poem. Night walk with Blackbird. I find I do many walks, and very often late into the night across the city. Night walk is long as the dark, dark long as the shadow, shadow long as lost gods, gods long gone as gutted words. Because I have walked so many miles alone, because it has been so long since I saw your face, the rings are falling off my fingers, bangles sliding off my wrists. When I come to count the dead, they do not look like numbers. They look like people who were loved, laid with care on hospital beds. Over the long wailing of ambulances, a blackbird begins to sing. And I think, this is what I mean. This is what I was trying to say all along. So the shadow reader's prediction of the date of my death occupied my mind, even if I didn't believe it. And the poems, as I said, slide over from the occupation of my mind to the occupation of countries and the earth, the natural world and its creatures. So with the year of my death arriving or having arrived, I thought it would be a good idea to write my will. But this is called writing the will. Before you begin to make an inventory of material gains and worldly goods, you are told it is possible and even advisable to bequeath your entire digital history to your heirs. The horror of it, the ignominy. Imagine all the trolling. She experiences a moment of dread. Supposing it comes back into fashion to bury the dead with all they possess, the laptops, phones, chargers, flat screens, consoles, cupboards, sofas, the shame of it, the scale of the tomb to be sunk underground for the cars and hairdryers, the unworn dresses, too tight to wear, too dear to lose. Think of the tons of soil to be shoveled out of the earth for the shoes. My God, the shoes. She has an off day. And excuse the bad language, but especially at the Khushwant Singh Literary Festival, I think that's okay because Khushwant never minded a bit of bad language. Sod off. If you sold, I can feel the spirit of Khushwant here. If you've sold the book or bagged the prize or launched a career or lost a stone and dropped a dress size. Sod off if you managed the holiday in Sharm el-Sheikh and posted a picture of the swimming pool and the strawberry mojito you are sipping this minute with a pink umbrella and ice. When I'm not like this, I'm nice, really. Smiley face. She contemplates her death. Please don't write an obituary that send a tweet that says how sweet I was. I died despising everything and every one of you, and especially did not appreciate the pictures you hearted of rabbits and donkeys. Night visitors. You can trust no one these days. With daily muggings on the streets and talk of burglaries, they call the experts to set up a network of interlocked alarms, infrared cameras at the entry points, cunning passwords, keys and fobs, sensors that trigger alerts on multiple mobile phones. They are reassured all the things inside are secure: laptops, consoles, golf clubs, miniatures, the collection of samurai swords, designer handbags, watches, rings. Wherever they may be, New York, Abu Dhabi, Beijing, they can watch the periphery. They expect strangers when the alerts begin. A fox skulks out of the bushes. A squirrel steals down a tree. A rat squeezes through a hole in the wall, all caught on camera. And here is the one who arrives in the night, not much more than a breath, spun into the lens, burnt out to white. All systems switch on to watch it come. An angel in a blur of light. The host. Much of this book is also about who is the host and who is the guest on this earth and in the many countries we've lived in. The host. While I've been away, the fruit flies have moved in with their extended family and rise politely off a feast of black banana skin to welcome me home. I swat and slap, but they just laugh on the updraft of my flapping, batting hands. The banana gone, I open a window, hoping they will make off to some other repast. But they post a halo round my head, 200 wing beats to a second, hatched with a brain far quicker than mine. At my desk, I'm possessed. Follow the threads for evidence of pestilence, the death of civilizations by Zebub, Arab, all the dust of Egypt turned to gnats that torment livestock, squat on ruined crop, rotted fish and frog. In the face of this invasion, I am an avenger sent to stop a plague, enter, kill fruit flies. Study the traps, fill a glass jar with cider vinegar, stir in sugar, cover with cunning cling film, pierce and wait, and they come. Hover like decorous guests at a table, perch on the rim. I watch them drown one by one, then return to my desk. But just as I begin to write, one rises up at the edge of my sight like the crop duster in North by Northwest. I spin back into battle, set the trap again, more delicious, more sugar, more stealth. It sits on the lip, licks at the cling film, sips. I strike. It dies a vinegar death. Through the rest of the day, I revisit the site. No sign of return. The next morning, no one is there. The jar untouched, my table bare in the desolate kitchen. I try to work, but keep coming back to stand like an expectant host, waiting to welcome the guest I miss. And I'll end with just the last two short poems. Everywhere, the angels. They are here with us, wings thrust into silk and wool, crawling over used surfaces where the body has thrashed and turned and shed its cells, its lovely dust. They leave a trail of eggs that float through warp and weft. The ghost children will stay unnamed, but eat the beauty of this life till there is nothing left of it but indrawn breath. And they will find Jerusalem in hair and fur, the fibre spun from hope and dread, in a lifetime that will last days and hang by a radiant thread. And I'll end with this one. I walk in the shadow. My walk is iambic. I keep the beat. Shall I compare the two? Da-dum, da-dum. There's comfort in knowing that as long as the stress is in the right place, and as long as I keep up the pace, it doesn't matter where my feet are going. If I can hear the iamb of my heart, I am not dead yet. My walk is a sonnet. My walk is mashallah. My walk is fuck you, shadow reader. Thank you. Thank you. And now, wonderful poet Robert Sita with the cello and the Nightingale.
Thank you very much, Imtiaz, and thank you so much for inviting me here, and I'm delighted to be reading with my dear friend, Imtiaz. As she said, many of the themes from her book will echo in this presentation as well. Dialogue over space and time, dialogue between humankind and nature, and music, and the music of poetry too. As Rachel said, I'm head of BBC History, so I tell the story of the BBC. And my favourite broadcast story over 100 years is the wonderful moment in 1924, so just shy of 100 years ago, when a cello and a nightingale made an improvised duet in a Surrey garden, and the world was enraptured. It was actually the first ever broadcast taken out of the studio, so the first outside broadcast, the first recording of nature on the BBC airwaves, and also the first radio hit internationally. So I've written, it inspired me to write as a poet and a performer, as well as to record it for history. So I've written a cycle of poems about unpacking the moment, how it happened, how it influenced listeners, but also what it symbolized, what that nightingale meant in a world that was war-torn, in a world that craved peace and harmony. So tapping into the themes of the festival today. So, but before I do that, I want you to go right back to the beginning, to 1924. Imagine you've never heard a radio broadcast. Because when it began in 1922, really nobody had any idea what radio could do. It was a sort of technical thing that men did in sheds, sending Morse code messages to one another. It was nothing to do with a mass media entertainment mode. But then people began to discover what you could do with radio. You could have drama and storytelling and children's and weather and daily prayers and drama and poetry and music. And it became the absolute passion of the 20s. And the word that people constantly use is magic. They cannot believe that out of the ether come these voices that transform a silent domestic world into a world of myriad voices. So my first poem is a setup poem. It's about the impact of radio. It's called Radio 1922. No trusting my own voice ever again, nor indeed anyone's. Everything unanchored, bodiless now, or as easy as light. But now the light comes through walls and doors, rafters of the roof, and down the familiar chimney. We cannot fathom its simple ubiquity. Is it the end of silence forever, we wonder? Though we can turn the voices on and off with a silver dial, they are out of the box now, and waiting breathless behind the wallpaper, in the upright aspidistra, inside china cups and saucers. And they come to us now, more tangible than dreams, even as we sleep. Now, to the moment of the cello and the nightingale, I'm going to introduce our chief protagonist, the famous cellist, Beatrice Harrison. She was actually born in India in 1892, the daughter of a distinguished soldier and an amateur musician mother, but they relocated to UK when Beatrice was very young. And they created a family of 4 prodigiously talented musical daughters. Beatrice began to play the cello when she was just 2. And she was enraptured through it. And as at a very early age, she toured all around the orchestras and the concert halls of Europe. She played for the President of the United States. She played for the Pope. She was the first woman as a cellist to play in Carnegie Hall in the USA. All the major composers of the age wrote for her: Elgar, Bax, Percy Grainger, Delius. And they all, many of them, proposed to her as well. But she was absolutely wedded to her music. And she also loved playing in nature. So she would wander around the gardens of her house and the woods, and she would play her cello. And then one day, in May 1924, she heard this. The sound of a nightingale. And she carried on playing in subsequent nights, and they began this improvised, informal duet. And it was a transformative moment. She was utterly compelled and transfixed by it, and she decided, because she was a very generous woman, she decided this must go on the radio. Everyone must be part of this moment, this unique moment, which I can celebrate with everybody through the new community of radio. So she goes straight to the top. She goes to John Reith, who was then the managing director of the BBC, became the director general of the first director general of the BBC, and she rings him up. And not surprisingly, he was very unpersuaded and unconvinced, because this had never happened before. We'd never taken radio out of the studio. It was going to be resource-heavy, expensive, and his trump card, which he announced in his dour Aberdonian accent, the bird may not sing. So this is a riff on John Reith's famous comment, this bird may not sing. This bird is not a parakeet, a poodle, a performing bear in a market square. This bird may not perform. This bird is not a puppet, a pole dancer, a parasol balancing tightrope walker. This bird may not play the game. This bird is not a phone set, a paraffin lamp, a pressing iron hissing on a board. This bird may not power up. This bird is precious, precarious, a prima donna without a price. This bird may not sing. But Beatrice must have been an extraordinary woman because she persuaded him. And so all the paraphernalia, as she describes it, the paraphernalia of the BBC arrives in Beatrice's house and garden, and they begin to set up the broadcast. So this is a short poem about the setup. It's called Paraphernalia. The man who commandeered it at the helm was Captain Arthur Gilbert Dixon West, the BBC's assistant chief engineer, along with the announcer Rex Parker. So this poem uses the diary extracts of Captain West. Paraphernalia. We planned. Underneath the tree was placed a magnetophone with a dozen or more accumulators for providing the power necessary to transform the bird's notes into electric current. We plotted. In the little summer house with its thatched roof was its amplifier, a couple of tangle of wires, a few old switches and batteries. We connected. This amplified signal was sent via the private telephone line of the house to London 2LO, the BBC transmitter. We announced. Rex Palmer, first London station master, was on air that night. We interrupt the Savoy Orpheans to bring you a very special broadcast. We waited. And the project was bedeviled by all sorts of technological issues. Flies and bees were trapped in the microphone. Rabbits and squirrels nibbled the cables. And the family, they loved animals. Their family had a pet donkey called Jerry, who also began braying because he wanted to be part of the activity. But finally, Beatrice begins to play. She plays for about half an hour. Nothing happens. No bird sings. No nightingale appears. And then finally, when she plays the London Derriere or Danny Boy, the bird begins to sing. And the nation was captivated. 50,000 letters flooded in from all around the world, some just addressed to the Nightingale lady. And even Reith succumbs to emotion. He said, a glamour of romance has flashed across the prosaic round of many a life. And the reason I think it was so special, this is only a decade after the Great War, the devastation of civilization, the destruction of nature, for one moment there is a belief that there can be harmony again, that a nightingale will bother to answer a cello and a representative of the humankind. So it's a sense of intimacy captured in this extraordinary dialogue. So this is about the impact of it. It's called The Listeners, and it's a deliberate riff on the famous poem by Walter de la Mare, written in 1912, with its famous opening line, is there anybody there? And in a way, it's asking the same question. Is there anybody listening in this world that man has devastated? The listeners. Only unpaired males sing regularly at night. And this cello is his love, beneath the bow of Beatrice Harrison. In a Surrey garden, on a seat near the lilac, against the darkening gloss of laurel, they make conversation. Surprised as we are that they have something to say, beak to bow. His name is Night in several languages. His impressive range of whistles, trills, and gurgles would rival any cello, urban cello. Still, they linger in the green, in the dark, watch the lights fill up the house's small windows. They hold belief like a small, damp flower a moment longer, while inside the house we listeners wait, count the notes of what we thought lost, and carry our happiness slowly through the day, lovely as it was and unfamiliar. Now, one of the paradoxes of this moment is that nature expresses itself through song, then through a conundrum of technology, it becomes something else, and then it makes us feel. So I wanted to explore this paradox, so I thought I'd get the Nightingale to tell the story. So this is The Nightingale Explains Radio. I am turned into electricity. I am abstracted into light. I am vibration, impulse, oscillation. Now tell me how I make you feel. Of course, there is a big debate about what were they really doing, the Nightingale and the cellist. Was the Nightingale just saying, to coin Imtiaz's phrase, sod off? This is my territory, my country, go away. Or are they doing a sort of elaborate courtship, a coquettish to and fro? Or is it something really musical? So Beatrice was convinced it was musical. She said the birds sang in thirds. So it was a musical composition, a musical dialogue. Anyway, here is Why Sing? Invention or need? The age-old question. Is it sex in the air, desire, and the desire to go on? Or the territory game, my voice containing it? Or a little making? Each song different, each song my own. I heard it in the air, outside of me and knew, so I sing. But over and beyond the broadcast, I think there is something significant about the Nightingale. The Nightingale has always had this emotive, emotional, resonant symbolism all through history. So if you go right back to classical times, it pops up in Homer, in Ovid. And if you go back to the original myth, it's a very dark and poignant myth. So the girl Philomel is raped by her brother-in-law, and he cuts out her tongue so that she will never admit the truth of what's happened. But she calls to the gods, she invokes the help of the gods, and they transform her into a nightingale. So this is myth. It's not a nice story. Lust and danger, rape and pain. The first ending is tonguelessness, the girl unspeaking, the darkness palpable. Then the gods intervene on a wish and a prayer. The girl grows feathers, a beak, a voice, and what a voice! She turns the pain into something outside herself. We all know the truth of that. Pain released, pain let go, pain and more pain till the body's emptied out. Then the way the cello takes it, carries it on the air lightly, oh so lightly, to somewhere else. So I think that myth is exploring how you make the painful things of the world, of life, how you can somehow mutate them into something that becomes almost beautiful, almost creative. And of course, the biggest manifestation of the Nightingale in the British canon is Keats's Ode to a Nightingale, with its famous opening lines, my heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains my senses as though of hemlock I have drunk. And it's the same paradox. How can you have the beauty of a nightingale in a world that's full of suffering and pain? So this is John Keats' Nightingale. You've been singing all this time. We just forgot to listen. My heart ached, my heart aches. The bird in the wood, piercing the night, then echo of echo, then something tangible, touching the heart, stopping the tide of noise. We slipped out of time and into you when we turned the dial and listened. Darkling, we listened. moving more benignly on, The Nightingale is the subject of one of the most popular songs of World War II, which I'm sure you know. That certain night, that night we met, there was magic abroad in the air. There were angels dining at the Ritz, and the nightingale sang in Berkeley Square. Actually, there is, even here, there's a BBC connection. There always is, because the man who wrote the lyrics for it was actually a BBC employee called Eric Mashvitz. He was the listing editor for the Radio Times, and then he went on to become head of BBC TV and Radio Light Entertainment. He also wrote the lyrics of Those Foolish Things, covered by Brian Ferry, and wrote the film script for Goodbye, Mr. Chips. So a very busy man. But here is A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square. You were never there, Nightingale. The habitat unconducive, the traffic invasive. But there again, there were no angels either dining at the Ritz, so let's be literal. I like to think it was the radio that day, in 1940, when they were bombing London to smithereens, and someone just turned up the volume, opened the window wide, tipped the small voice into our ears in the park below, left us, in spite of it all, surprised and hopeful. There is a darker note to this Nightingale story. The Nightingale, they continued to record it for 10 years in the garden. And of course, it continued through the war years of World War II. And there was a hope that the sound of the Nightingale would be a salve to the war-torn nation. So they were recording it in 1942 as the bombers were leaving Britain to go and bomb Germany. And the security protocol was that you could not leave that on air because it might give climactic information to the enemy. So it was switched off on the recording. They switched off for the broadcast, but actually they kept the recording. So you have this, and also they recorded it coming back. So 11 fewer bombers returned from the bombing raid, but you have the sound of the bombers and you have the sound of the Nightingale. So a poignant overlay, again, of the destructive qualities of man and the aspirations of nature. One of the great things about doing a book like this is you discover extraordinary things. So I discovered in my research that there was a 17th century cleric and scientist called Charles Morton who couldn't understand where birds went when they migrated. So he finally came up with this stunning conclusion. They obviously went to the moon. So this is Moon, drawn by white light to a 6-month disappearing act, then drawn back to blue earth in spring. Not true, of course, but a better place to be than the earth we have ruined for them. Safe moon, briefly uncluttered, where the nightingale rests, till drawn back by music and the kinder things. And in a way, that theme of the destruction, I mean, there are 92% fewer nightingales now. We have lost so much, as we know, of our habitat. So it's a reminder of the poignant state we've left the world in. This is the last poem in the sequence, which is called The Garden, and it evokes Beatrice again in her environment, in harmony with the nightingale. The Garden. And here she is. The garden. The garden, not the garden. The birds no longer here. How the traffic hum and the mobile phones hunger for silence. The deep green patch of it. And the blue memory of music. She came 100 years ago with her chair and sat in a ditch to play her cello for hours, till the garden, then the garden, was all in darkness and wrapped its arms completely around her. There are a couple more radio poems, because I am fascinated by the beginning of radio. It's such a sort of transformative moment in terms of us and in terms of our lives. So here are a couple more poems about early radio. And we're in a world that's war-torn, destructive, full of sorrow and conflict. Imagine one day a newsreader goes onto the airwaves and says, "Today there is no news, so I'm just going to play some cello music. I'm just going to play some Chopin." And that's what happened in April 1930. The newsreader said, "Today there is no news. In our whole wide world, nothing is happening. The news machine is sleeping. On the horizon, that Droitwich transmitter is unblinking, out of business. Though a baby must be born, for population demands it. A man or woman must be dying somewhere, though peacefully, aged hands on top of the coverlet. Crops too must rise and swell the sea, heap itself against the shore, weight of water hitting the sand as gravity requires. But the world is not tilted at any extreme. Imagine it. No famine, flood or fire, no rumbling of tanks across the repeatedly scarred and scorched old earth. Just a day of mere rotation. Familiar sun, familiar stars, blank, benign monotony. We talk of the unhappening with gentle awe, while Morse code fingers tap out, all well, all well. And the BBC newsman clears his desk, saunters home early to buy his boy an ice cream, and dogs sleep on in innocent, sunlit radio silence. And just a couple more. People are fascinated by the mechanics of radio, and one of the things they absolutely love is Foley, the Foley effects, which are the objects used to create radio drama if you don't use electronic effects. And the paradox here is that nothing real sounds real. So and also you have to use things that are in the studio. So they use, for example, radio tape. The old-fashioned tape is used for autumn leaves. A glove is used for a wing. An ironing board is used for a gate. So this is the paradox of radio, Foley. Cornstarch is snow. A pair of leather gloves is the flap of a bird's wing, while a large staple gun makes an excellent revolver shot. And frozen romaine lettuce snaps, sharp as a bone. Of course, you knew that nothing was what it seemed, didn't you? Cellophane crackles like the flare of fire. Coils of leftover audio tape make autumn leaves along everyday city pavements or in woodland drifts. Later we'll eat the lettuce. We'll wear those gloves as we stroll out of Broadcasting House into the November dusk. Of course, the sudden rain against our faces is real. Of course, that voice and everything it says is really my own. Just a couple more. These beautiful illustrations are done by my friend and colleague, Jessica Palmer, and she's evoking a sort of style, an Art Deco style, of the black and white illustrations that were done for the Radio Times from the 1923 onwards. And this next poem is about the man, Eric Fraser, who did lots of these illustrations, often at pace, to a terrible deadline. He was given these completely opaque briefs and had to sort of magic up something that made audio visual. So this is broadcasting love. This is the house of broadcasting love. Songs of amore, classical, modernist, occasionally populist, scheduled over 7 radio days. Take your pick. And Eric Fraser is sent to his garden shed on a Friday night to illustrate the theme. Something in your usual exquisite style, says the commissioner's note. Though for 7 heaven's sake, no one here understands what the heck the programme's about. So how to do it, thinks Eric, his black pen poised, the pool of ink unrevealing. How to make songs into space, amore captured, contained, and turn it into a 4x3-inch rectangular box for the Radio Times reader to understand. By Monday at 10 a.m, on the dot, please. He eats it, drinks it, walks his dog in the evening park to it, sits in his shed till the building spins its gentle curve, and lovers inside each other's arms appear in the architrave, to the right, to the left, embrace and stay, kiss and linger, as if entranced by the oh-so-small music that only they can hear, as if this is another life, inexpressible. That's it, thinks Eric, as the Monday sun rises. And my last poem is, it's an evocation of when I was little, we had this big wireless, and you had to tune it, and you'd go up and down with this little pointer, and you'd find all these places and these countries and these languages, do you remember? And you never ever found them again. Radio. There's no turning off the thought of you, though I track the dial along glittering new frontiers, alluring places, other rooms in other lives. No use. The needle comes back. You are where the light glows. Your voice in my ear, my head, it's in constant, unwavering signal. And I'm going to leave you with the Nightingale. Thank you so much.
Am I going to spoil the Nightingale? What absolutely wonderful session. And you know that, I mean, when you hear poets, you realise the value of words, and it's very hard to say anything after that except thank you. And what an extraordinary experience. So as I said before, Imtiaz and Robert will be signing books, and I'm sure I won't be the only one. I have Shadowlands, but I think I definitely need the Cello and the Nightingale after that. Wonderful, thank you. And that takes us to our last session before lunch today, a very different session, Country Walks Through Colonial Britain. Do I have Corinne and Raj here? Excellent, excellent. I say come on stage, and I've got your goodie bags. Don't run away, poets. I've got them right here at my feet. Corinne Fowler is a public humanities scholar and professor of colonialism and heritage. Following her direction of a child-led project called Colonial Countryside, National Trust Houses Reinterpreted in 2020, she co-authored